Hello and welcome to another episode of the RF podcast. My name is Dennis van der Laan. I'm one of the journalists at railfreight.com. Today I have with me Chris Kosmala, who has an extensive background working with various aspects of transportation and the various modes of transportation. And Diogo Ferreira Nunes, who is a rail journalist from Portugal. In the rail freight sector, we hear a lot about the technical specifications of trains, such as the widely desired 740 or 750 meter trains. We just had a discussion off the record about that may not be the most pressing issue to discuss in the sector. At least that is the opinion of Chris, if I understood correctly. And so we are going to focus on something else today, namely problems that occur after presenting the train to the infrastructure manager or the network owner. So Chris, you commented about this on LinkedIn, so I want to maybe revert back to that comment. Could we maybe discuss a little bit what is the key issue that we encounter after the presentation of a train to the network owner? Could you run us through the procedures or obstacles that arise and the importance of them?
Yeah, let's look at this. Essentially, the infrastructure operator has a finite inventory of tracks, of assets, right? The train operator has certain flexibility. There are a number of wagons, there's a number of trains that they have to deal with. They promise to their customers to have certain capacity of the rolling stock, which will be then presented to the network. So when you think how these two people with a slightly different objectives and slightly different group of assets that they have to deal with and slightly different constraints that apply to those assets, they have to agree on something well in advance. So let's say it's an annual contract for a timetable. Or maybe this is months in advance, which will be then adjusted on a nearly like a few week basis, so that by tactical situations occurring either on the network side or on the operator side. And then of course we have a day of the operations where things could go wrong, and a number of decisions will have to be made by both the infrastructure manager and by the train operator to essentially adjust. One of them will be insisting that the other one changes or does something. It is very difficult to establish essentially level of collaboration, and very difficult to say whose decision takes precedence. Okay? And of course, the closer we are to the day of operations or the day of operations, I cannot adjust something or inform somebody else who is connected with me that they need to consider impact on their side. What I'm trying to say is the train and the network operator or the network owner can agree, but not everything moves from point A to B on rail, right? We, at some points, will be transloading this onto the tracks, or from the tracks to the train, or from the train to the tracks. The tracks are ordered by the owner of the cargo. They have to do a lot of planning in advance as well. If nobody informs the next party with some sort of advance notice, and there is no clear transparency of what I have to tell you, then the chain of events will further down, drop down the whole supply chain, and everybody will be out of sync. And whenever we say it's out of sync, well, that costs money. There is a loss of time, but there's also cost of real money, because something else has been ordered to synchronize with something else that was supposed to arrive at particular time, at particular moment, at particular physical location. If we cannot deliver on this, and nobody really knows because the events are sometimes overtaking us, then our supply chains incur huge costs, which hardly anybody can continue living with, because we have to budget for all of these things. We have to understand the impact of on our finances and everybody.
And Chris, how this transparency can be achieved from your point of view?
Listen, it's not passive transparency, right? Because there are so many elements that impact availability of the track and a movement of rolling stock on the top of the track. This data is impossible for the human to sit over in the operation center of the track owner and say, oh, this looks like will have this kind of impact, both in time and money, right? So at some point, we need the technology of collaboration that is much higher sophistication and much higher span of attention than humans and their communication devices. Whether it's email, whether it's a portal, whether it's a mobile phone, that is not enough. That is not sufficient. We're talking about this, right? The more operators I invite onto the network, allow them to use the network, the more clashes between the objectives and the situations occurring to both, right? And remember what we were saying is network is not flexible. There's certain number of tracks of a certain length, and on these tracks, specific tracks accept specific weights, specific number of axles, specific types of the train, right? It's a containers stuck on the top of each other, so double decked, or they're tanks with dangerous goods.
Exactly.
They all have so it's not like every operator of the rolling stock is consistent with the next guy, right? But we're all moving on the same tracks, on a finite inventory of these tracks, on a finite number of these assets with a finite length and finite physical capacity to take our trains. So we need to think of collaboration that it's far more advanced than what we are implementing today.
So we need a massive doses of technology.
I would say so, right? I mean, AI is a great example, right? Artificial intelligence. What is the impact of this? At this moment, everybody's preoccupied with large language models and how amazing it is that I can type my question into my browser and eventually there is the answer, right? So yesterday, I think there was a good presentation by ProRail. Saying, okay, well, we decided in a center of excellence that a good project will be something to support our operation center people, right? In Zwolle was used as an example, and they can do inquiry about specific situation, and the system will return the procedure to essentially deal with that, right? I cannot. This is not the AI that will make or break the problems of allocating the trains to the network, agreeing on the timetables, and then running to the timetable, rather than ad hoc changing everything. But it's the example of the portal where I can request that information is not good. The AI technology itself is there to actually solve this. We have not yet discussed this over here and at this event, but maybe on the next Rail Freight event, I'm hoping to actually see more sophistication actually coming up with somebody saying, we are trying to address collaboration between the two parties.
More startups, probably.
Yeah, it could be something like this. It's like we need more dynamic thinking. I know it's a very conservative industry. Obviously, it is, we are all kind of preoccupied with assets rather than with information that flows on the top of how we use our assets. But we need to be bringing that discussion of saying AI has progressed, and now the collaboration that was not possible like before, now we have more chances. And we have to experiment with this. So Center of Excellence should not be saying, I'm going to wait for somebody to tell me that they have a problem and maybe I can build a solution, right? We have to be proactively thinking from these centers of excellence of technology inside both the operators of the infrastructure and operators of the rolling stock, and saying, hey guys, we think that this is what could be done, and let us run a pilot with that. So much more aggressive approach from the Center of Excellence, rather than being a recipient of ideas and sorting out through those ideas, actually come up with the ideas because we observe the technology faster in the Center of Excellence, right? So we should be going out to the users and saying, hey, there is a modification, we could potentially modify this, and we know that the problem is collaboration. The issue of synchronization of moves by the operator and by the owner of the infrastructure. That's what I would love to see.
Okay. So, if I understand correctly, there's always this permanent issue of businesses that want to send their train onto the network, but they may not know beforehand what route their train is going to take, when it's going to arrive, because there's always this risk.
We agree on this. So when I submit the capacity request to the so I'm the operator, right, or the rail undertaker. When I submit my capacity request and my technical compliance, which is essentially a technical description of the trains that I will be running.
Yeah.
Okay. The path allocation, both the feasibility study of the path allocation and then the final decision on the path allocation by the infrastructure manager will be presented and they will be set, right? So that's my annual, or let's say 6 months long or 12 months long timetable.
Mm-hmm.
So now I can present that timetable to my customers as the operator and say, hey, my trains will be running like this, with this frequency, with that length, and that means that as long as you provide your container or your cargo, I will attach to this train and it will always go because it will be there, right, from this terminal.
Yes.
But this timetable, like I said, it's firm, but it's really changing by the situation, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you can have events like unexpected flooding, landslide, or something like this that affects availability of the track. The operator of the infrastructure may decide different path based on the specific technical specifications of your train.
Yeah.
That will be done ad hoc, but he should tell this as early as possible to the operator, so the operator can advise their customers that there will be this impact.
Yeah.
And the problem is that information is not flowing freely right now, well in advance, to provide everybody with a transparent planning adjustment.
Yeah. And this is kind of what I maybe wanted to latch on to. So businesses that maybe want to use the railways, they can, in theory, maybe also in practice, never really be sure that their products will arrive on time. So what impact does this have on businesses, on railway undertakings, and perhaps also on the broader supply chain? How does this hinder the much talked about modal shift? How big of an obstacle is this to make sure that companies are willing to use the railways?
I think we have this problem, right? So Diogo, we were commenting about this yesterday, right?
Exactly.
The issues on the Iberian Peninsula, right? The problem is flexibility versus rigidity, right? So if I'm rigid, and the network of railway is kind of rigid, right?
Yeah.
We cannot move the rails, basically.
You cannot move the rails, and you have to submit the cargo well in advance, so it's actually put in together in a bunch of wagons, attached to other wagons, and then roll, right? So that's a problem with the big statements. So at this moment, let's say we have 15% of cargo within Europe, more or less, moves by train, right? Which is much lower than, let's say, United States, Canada. There's just the circumstances. Okay, fine. But we also have ambitious statements from major ports in Europe, like, for instance, Antwerp, Hamburg, Rotterdam, which say we will incentivize everybody to bring usage of a rail to 45%. By 2030, let's say, or by some nice round year ending up in a round number. That is dreaming, because we are not providing infinite flexibility that the track provides. Therefore, it is not natural that suddenly we'll be able to double or triple then the usage of rail versus the road. So you have to think about what the customers will value. Flexibility, well, flexibility is not possible, right? Because we have a finite number of tracks, and these tracks run between certain points. It's not like a road where we can send the track and we'll eventually somehow make it over there, right? So if not flexibility, then at least reliability, always on time, without any hiccups. Well, that one we could actually do something about, right? Because even if there is a hiccup, if there is a transparent advice flowing down the chain, then the chain can adjust to it. If it's a lot of ad hoc, unexpected events always, okay, then nobody can adjust anything, and we're always the ad hoc will spill down all the way down the chain. So a factory relying on something arriving on Thursday at between 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock now has to adjust. That it may be Thursday, probability of 70%, arriving sometimes between 6 o'clock and maybe 11 o'clock. Now I have to adjust my factory production. And it's okay if I deal with the discrete inputs, but what if I deal with liquids, with fuels, with chemicals, which are very important for mixing on time in a specific quantities? I cannot hold infinite inventory to adjust for the problems in transportation, because I don't have enough tanks, I don't have enough warehouse space, I may not have enough capacity to hold extra inventory to deal with the fact that the trains do not arrive on time, or the trucks are encountering traffic problems, right?
But maybe it's better to delay a bit a freight train and make sure it arrives on that time than set a time which you know by advance it will not be fulfilled.
Yeah, but, okay, with the roads, we could be more dynamic in terms of saying, okay, we're gonna open the road, close the road, allow more trucks, roller trucks. But with trains, it's a very different situation. When I accept technical specification of the train, I know the window between two passenger trains that I can mix the cargo trains in between, right? I know how long that train will take to brake to a complete stop. I know how long it will take to accelerate to the transit speed, right? So that's those things cannot be adjusted. It's not like I think we had the discussion yesterday too.
Yes, exactly.
Could I make a last-minute decision saying, "Hey, I have an empty window. Let's bring a train in"?
But with what?
No, well, it's not possible because as a train operator, I have to be in 100% all the time, 24/7 standby. But you know, there are crews, there are union rules. I cannot have people ready. Then once I send them, they may be exceeding the safety, the duration of their work. So there is a lot of clashes that happen that prevent us in railways from being much more ad hoc in terms of decision making, right? So it's not gonna happen. And the problem is, if that's not gonna happen, then by default, the users or the owners of the cargo will be more reluctant to use the train versus use the trucks. So we have to think about, okay, it's not enough to say, 45% of the freight will be moving by rail. It's also saying between 15 and 45, the following adjustments have to change, have to be made, both by the operators, by the owners of the infrastructure, and then of course how they collaborate, so we could actually be a little bit closer to the ad hoc. The decisions on the day of operations are maybe tactical of 10 days, 14 days, could be actually taken, and everybody can collaborate in that. But if I agree to a timetable in 12 months in advance, okay, and I cannot live to that, now imagine how I can achieve that kind of practical operation on a weekly basis when the decision's happening a few days in advance rather than 12 months in advance.
And what would you think, Chris, about passenger trains carrying small goods like shop deliveries to attract a different range of customers, for example, and clients?
Yes, that's true, but small bits, we're gonna use the truck or smaller truck to essentially just get us very quickly to the doors, because there's expectation. Some cargo is expected on a best delivery basis, right? Mm-hmm. And let's say, when Amazon promises you something within 24 hours,
or even less.
Yeah, or even less. Obviously, they will be relying on smaller, progressively smaller trucks to actually get into the neighborhoods, into the delivery addresses. Rail, we don't use it really that much, right? Here we send bigger volumes of the same type of product. Let's say look inside the container, and we know that it will take 3 days to travel from point A to B, and we agreed on this, 12 months in advance. I just want you to live by that, because then I plan my inventory of my distribution centers rather than inventory necessary to fulfill very small, tiny orders.
And will there be an opportunity for rail freight to take on the quick deliveries? Will there be any opportunity, or we will let this to the road transport only?
I mean, listen, I think that we discussed this. I remember the example of delivery of lunches in India,
Exactly.
right? That somehow all of these lunches are, cooked by the wife staying at home, somehow get loaded on the train and delivered at lunchtime to the destination stations, right? There's a famous case study, right? How they do it.
This is a real thing in India. They do this. Okay. I was not aware.
And in the past, there were the mail trains, for example.
Yeah. So there are some examples, right? So there is some nature of some traffic that is repeatable. It always occurs in a certain volumes on a particular train. I can have a capacity on a train to accept that type of cargo. Load it quickly, unload it quickly, even within the windows that the passengers are entering and exiting the train, right? But that's a reality that is not going to apply to many types of goods.
It's dream only. We are only dreaming. Okay.
Well, it's an interesting case, and maybe, but our bigger, like I said, it's you have to concentrate on a type of problem that we're trying to solve, right? And I think that was the reason my comments on LinkedIn was about the length of the train. Yeah, we can debate whether it's 500, 750 meters, or let's follow the Americans and do 2 kilometers, right? 2,000 meters.
Giga trains.
Yeah, it won't make really that much difference. In fact, the longer the trains, now I have a capacity issue because the longer train takes more space. Stationary takes more space to accelerate, takes more space and time to decelerate. So yeah, it's a problem that it's not solving the bigger issue, which is reliability of the rail to the levels where we can say we're gonna get up from 15% to 45% of goods going by rail rather than just defaulting to track because it's just much easier, much more reliable.
And we were speaking a little bit about the possible solutions. We discussed technology a little bit. I wanted to maybe introduce a new possible solution, something that also has to do with the capacity regulation at an EU level, where there is some talk. I don't actually know what's in the capacity regulations like specifically about this, but I know that there is some discussion about this at the very least. This is about financial penalties for infrastructure managers. Would that be something to consider? Because if they have endless freedom in organizing detours for trains and there's no consequences for them, could this be an incentive for infrastructure managers to be more reliable? And
Dennis, I have to say that if you introduce that in Portugal right now, there will be a huge problem because the fines would be astronomical, seriously. Because there are many problems with the infrastructure management, and Chris knows a lot about it too.
Yeah, I mean, listen. So the big issue is competing objectives and somehow how we make money. And I have to say that the infrastructure manager making money from penalizing operator who doesn't manage to submit the train on time or present the train into the window. I mean, okay, that's an adversarial relationship with me, and especially because the operator cannot charge the infrastructure manager because the window that they promised has not been open, right? Because there's some issue that affects access to the track or the availability of the track for my type of train to run. I think we need to remove it, because if you have that adversarial relationship, there is no trust. And there is no trust, then we cannot talk about collaboration. You're using AI to make it faster or more precise, because there's just simply, I'd be feeling it's like, why should I make your life easier if you're gonna, charge me or have that penalty on me? And then So now this is penalty from the infrastructure manager to the operator of the train. Now imagine you add the second avenue, which is from the operator onto the track manager. I mean, then you're essentially adding more adversarial aspect into the relationship. Well, then nobody will take care of somebody else's business. Now we'll be all watching our own backs and trying to charge each other. That is not the future. I mean, we're not going to accomplish anything with that. That's my personal opinion.
That's a very good point.
No, Dennis.
No, I was going to ask you if you have any final questions, or maybe Chris, if you have any final remarks, something that you really want to address.
Maybe some final remarks from Chris, since he knows so much about the European situation on the rail freight. Maybe he can add some input to our podcast.
I think it's there's plenty to discuss, right? I don't want to stretch this podcast for a long time, right? I mean, we have to take care of our listeners. But I would say, the track access charges, they have to be more predictable because everybody operates on margins, and those margins are not huge.
They're very narrow.
So therefore, when we agree to a contract, please live by what we agree, and do not infantry increase the charges for access to the infrastructure just because you can. And this is the problem, right? Because you can, you're gonna increase it, but that is no way for me to run profitable business with a profitability that it's reliable to my shareholders. That's a big thing. The second one, network renovations. Okay, I understand that some fixes to the network cannot be planned year to year in advance, so everybody can adjust the timetables and we can adjust our contracts. I can understand it, right? So maybe here we need to force both sides, at least both sides on this one, this aspect of the rail, to collaborate in a different ways than we collaborate right now. Because technical capabilities are increasing. There is an AI. We need to be looking together at this and saying, can this help us? Okay? Because the network renovations, fixes, they will not go away. So, okay, well, but is there something that it can run on top of this to give us a little bit more predictability? Because if I cannot predict, if my probabilities are too low, then I cannot behave reliably. And then everybody else will just simply say, okay, I'm gonna use the track. And this is the thing that we want to avoid. We want to avoid the customer waving their hand and saying, no, I will just go by track, right? So that would be really my big, those two big things, right? The track access charges, okay, there's got to be a different approach. It should not be just simply, yeah, I can. The penalties to access the track, let's not touch this, and in fact let's remove the fact that I can penalize the operators for not presenting on the train. I have to really think about more dynamic way of using the fact that now I have an available slot because that train will not be presented, okay? So rather than sending the guy the penalty ticket, I have to have a technology to help me out when saying, can I use that network somehow for somebody else, okay? And the third one, network renovations, which comes to the collaboration, to changing of the paths that we agreed to. We got to be looking at the information technology that it's much has progressed, but we have not yet grabbed that progression to the benefit of both sides.
I think it's a very clear message.
Yes, very clear. Like a pull market for, okay, I cannot use this channel, so maybe someone else can use it. So this is like a pull market for rail tracks, for example.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you, Diogo, also for attending.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Diogo. Good discussion, and thank you, Dennis, for the invitation.
Well, you're welcome. Yeah, we'll be wrapping it up here. Thank you also to the listeners, and we will hear from you in the next episode.